5 a.m. on the beautiful island of Rota. We'll call this meeting to order and we'll begin with our roll call. Our Honorable Governor Ralph Torres is here. Our Chairman Jerry Tan. Senate President Jude Hofschneider. House Speaker Edwin Villagomez. If we see our screen. Morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Bo Palacios. You see on the screen. Morning, Mr. Palacios.
Here.
Matt De Leon Guerrero. Morning, Matt.
Hi, everybody. Good morning.
Alex Sablan. Joe Guerrero. Don Howard. Marcy Tumakani. Brian Shin. Alex Yoon, who we see online.
Good morning, everybody.
Aubrey Bokuk. Gary Sword. And Mr. Warren Villagomez. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum. We need a motion to adopt the agenda. So moved and seconded by Matt. Thank you. Motion to adopt the minutes. Moved by Alex. Thank you. Seconded by Gary. All right. So moving on to the next item on our agenda is a greetings and message from our Honorable Governor to members of the Council. Governor.
So, can you get louder too? Can you hear it?
Yes. Yeah.
Good morning, to everyone. I want to first thank our mayor. Thank you very much for hosting and opening up your arms to all of us. Truly appreciate it. To also the minority bloc who's here, being part of the PPP. I would like to also acknowledge Senator Cruz who's here, and Senator Biddy. Thank you for being part of the GCEA today. Of course, to Mayor's left, Senator Hoku.
Yep.
Thank you very much. That's my hands are touching my left right. But Senator Hoku, thank you also for always being there, supporting the team. Jerry, again, thank you for everything that you do, the organization, Governor's Economic Council advisors. Really, it's a great honor for me to be here and to see all the things that you created and in partnership. Brian, thank you for being here. I know today this is your first trip here, and I see that throughout our conversation, this is something that you also want to pursue. And hopefully, we can have a good incentive for our Korean market here. So again, I just wanted to thank everyone. It is a great honor and great blessing for us to be here to experience the beauty and the love of Florida. So again, thank you. Thank you, everyone there.
Thank you, Honorable Governor. Next item on our agenda is greetings and welcome remarks from our Honorable Mayor Ephraim Athalig. Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, President.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. This is really an exciting day for Rota, and as mayor of Rota, I'm deeply moved by the presence of the Economic Council of here. And Governor, I want to thank you for bringing the meeting to Rota, and let's continue to work together. And like I said, this is really an exciting event for Rota. So, on behalf of the people of Rota and the leadership, we extend our deepest appreciation to the Governor's Economic Council for meeting here in Rota. So, for all of you. Thank you.
Council members, next item on our agenda is our video presentation and Chairman's report from Chairman Jerry Tan. Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Governor. Good
Morning, Mayor, and morning, Senator Hong Kong, Senator Vinny, and Senator Cruz. Really great to be back in Rota. Some of you may not realize, actually, we picked today to be here to celebrate our Governor Economic Council first anniversary. We'll talk a little bit more later during lunch, but this is a very, very special day because exactly a year ago, Governor signed an executive order and created this Economic Council, trying to see how we can get out of the economic crisis as a result of the pandemic. And it's been really fun working with the council. Most of us are here today, whether it's in Rota or via Zoom. Governor, really thank you for creating this body, and we'll continue to explore the opportunity. But Mayor, this morning, actually, we have a very important and interesting presentation, and you see the beautiful lady. It's 6 a.m. in Hong Kong. She's sitting there, ready to present and answer any question. The goal is to make sure that we actively engage not just Saipan community, but also Rota, Tinian, and even Northern Island. And it will be highlighted in this morning's presentation because it is about multi-island destination. We believe that this is something that MVA moving forward should be focusing on, and we'll talk some more during the presentation. But it's really great that we were at the basketball court yesterday, and that is also one of the initiatives that we are very happy with. You know, over 50 sites, over 50 partners, including 3 on Rota. And so we'll go back out and finish what we need to, what we started. Actually, really, most credit has to go to, or all credit has to go to the minority bloc, who came in and really worked under the sun. A little bit rain yesterday, I witnessed it, and they've been doing a wonderful job also in the island of Saipan as well. And that PPP program will continue to expand throughout the community and really get a lot of things upgraded so that, especially in the basketball court, so that our kids can go back out and play and be active. So as usual, I have 2 videos, not very long, 3 minutes each, to share with the council this morning. So let's show the video first. every month we show one video to highlight the PPP activities for the last 30 days. So actually what you saw is actually since the last council meeting, which is around the 20th of each month. So you can see how active all the PPP partners have been actually every weekend. So you just imagine we have started maybe 8 or 9 months ago, and this is the volume of activity actually taking place every month. And so what you saw was just the last 4 weeks by different groups. So just bear with me, I just have another 3 minutes or so video to share with you.
Para ifamagonta, para imanangkota, para ifamilyata, para ikomunidata, dyan islata si. We all have the responsibility
to volunteer,
to preserve,
to support,
to guide,
to educate,
to advocate,
to serve,
To protect.
to dream big,
to spread hope, to lead,
to represent.
So we have to work very hard at the Economic Council to reach out to everyone in the country to understand and rally behind this effort. Because the end goal is good for everyone. It takes the community effort to make it happen. We have set the vision. We acknowledge the problem. And what do we do next?
together.
우린 함께할 수 있다.
So I hope you enjoy both short video of course the Economic Council is more than just PPP activities. Senator Alcock just advised me this morning before the meeting that the CEDA bill, which was passed a couple of weeks ago by the House, was passed by the Senate a few days earlier this week. All the senators, some of the senators are here, so can we give a round of applause to our senators for supporting? This is our first proposed legislation that we put forward from the council, and we're really, really pleased that we're able to work with the legislature and explain the intent of the bill. And we definitely will continue to work closely with the administration and hope to transform CDA into CEDA. And this is all about, the only thing, the name difference is just to add the word economic development. And we will probably hear a lot more about CEDA, in the coming months and coming years. We will work on other initiatives as we move along for the rest of the year. But this morning, we also want to present the new office, Governor, you created. Alex, you can take over.
Governor, Mayor, Senators, Minority Bloc, and members of the community. From the beginning, and this is really primarily within Mike Sablan's committee, which was looking at the rebooting of our economy and ways to look at fixing systemic issues within the confines of our government structure. And one of the big things he's looking at is permitting, our procurement process. And I think through the discussions throughout our meetings, we have been talking about the ways to attempt to try to accelerate the use of, and thanks to the Trump administration for CARES Act funding, to the Biden administration for ARPA, and soon to be, we hope, BBB, Build Back Better, and the Jobs Act that President Biden is putting forward. We're looking at CDBG-DR, $244 million, structurally brought in by the administration. We're looking at the FEMA funding that is on the ground for housing. We're looking at, again, ARPA funding, BBB. We've got near $1 billion today on the ground in total development projects that will be put forward over the course of the next year to 5 years. And again, have the potential of over $1 billion through BBB. With over $2 billion in development, we felt the need to pursue the idea about accelerating these projects, to looking at the idea of having line agencies within government get support so that we can put these shovel-ready projects on the ground as quickly as possible. To the great work at the planning office and bringing in near $88 million in EDA funding that's coming as well. And so we'd like to, as we did in our article this week, Mike Sablan wrote towards the effort of the Infrastructure and Recovery Office, of which the governor has put forward. And again, I think this is a basis of our ongoing discussions at the GCEA that I believe we should endorse this office for what it is, which is bringing a group of very structured professionals that will help the line agencies move these projects quicker through the process of permitting and all of the other admin and requirements that each of these agencies require to putting a project in motion. And so we applaud the governor, we applaud the idea behind it. I think this is an impetus of the GCEA pushing in and asking the governor to get projects going. And so with that, I just basically want to give an overview of where I think the initial impetus, the idea behind the Infrastructure and Recovery Office came from. And from what I hear of the individuals that are coming onto the organization, we are going to have a very good group of individuals. From people that are not here currently and are returning home to be a part of this process. And so we are bringing home our local Chamorro Carolinian professionals back into the community, and I think we're all going to be better for it. So thank you. To the GCEA members and ask for the official endorsement of the Governor's Recovery and Infrastructure Office. I can hear a second.
Second. moved and seconded. Thank you very much, Alex and Gary. Unless there are any objections on the floor, motion carries. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, so the next item on the agenda, the PPP Public-Private Partnership Memorandum of Understanding signing. We do want to recognize that we have existing MOUs signed, which we did via Zoom a few meetings ago with members of the Rota community. And if they're here this morning, we'd like to call you up to take a photo with the governor, mayor, and the members of the council. Representatives from the Rota mayor's office. You see the mayor's here, thank you, Mayor. The Filipino community of Rota, Rota Merchandising and DK Brothers, Hotel Valentino, and the Commonwealth Ports Authority. If you can please come up to the table and we'll take a photo with you guys and the governor. Port and Youth Center and Airport Road here in Rota. Is with the Office of the House Minority from the 22nd Legislature for their adoption of the Carolinian Wood, the Civic Center, Beach Pavilion, and Palpa Beach Pathway in Saipan. And the Rota Sinapalo Basketball Court and Youth Center. If we can call up the members of the House Minority from the 22nd Legislature, Congressman Joel Komatsu, Congressman Flores, Congressman Lipan Guerrero, Congressman Blanco, Congressman Demupan, Congressman San Nicolas, Congressman Yumo, Congressman Sablan. Thank you.
Hurry up, the clock is ticking. Almost 5 o'clock. It's almost 5 o'clock. Happy hour. Happy hour.
Please stay for a photo. Item on the agenda, we'll move to our guest speaker, Ms. Darlena Zhai. Darlena is a graduate of the Cornell Hotel School in 2007. She's been involved in over 300 tourism and hospitality projects in over 75 key markets across Asia, the Pacific Islands, the Caribbean, and Africa. A director at the Hong Kong office of Horwath HTL until 2018, Ms. Zhai has extensive experience in destination tourism planning, sustainable development, feasibility and market studies for hotel and tourism developments, hotel management, contract negotiations, and asset management. Ms. Zhai was the main author for the Sustainable Tourism Development Study prepared for the Marianas Visitors Authority in 2017. Her experience in the Pacific Islands also covers more than 15 other studies in markets including the CNMI, Palau, Guam, and Fiji. Without further ado, we hand the floor over to Ms. Darlena Zhai. Thank you for joining us all the way from Hong Kong early this morning on a Saturday. Ms. Darlena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today.
Okay, and there is a video that today, as I understand, which is going to be your presentation, and you'll be stick around for some Q&A afterwards. Darlena, thank you.
Yep.
So please cue the video.
Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here to present the findings of a study on sustainably developing the Marianas into a multi-island integrated destination. Although the Marianas has 14 islands, development in the past has predominantly been focused on Saipan alone. While tourism in Saipan has enjoyed several periods of success, it remains a mass market island. And even though a revitalization of Saipan could be achieved through the upgrading of existing facilities and the introduction of global brands, in order to truly break through and elevate the positioning of the overall Marianas as a multi-island destination to a whole new level, going into the new travel era, opportunities really lie with the lesser developed islands. One of the biggest advantages the Marianas has over its competitors, Guam for instance, is the availability of 13 other islands aside from Saipan, most of which are relatively untouched. Amongst them, Rota is one that really shines through as one that presents the most prime opportunities, given that it has some existing infrastructure, a community known for its friendliness, pristine natural beauty, and a large amount of historical relics from all different periods of the Marianas' heritage. Today, we'll take a look at the kinds of opportunities and products that could be explored for Rota, how these could be tied in with potential products for the Northern Islands, and afterwards, we'll take a look at how these all fit into the overall offerings, and together with Tinian and Saipan, could help turn the Marianas into a true, sustainable, multi-island destination. Let's begin by looking at Rota. In terms of access, Rota could be reached by a short 30-minute flight from both Guam and Saipan. While the flight itself is simple, it's the frequency and convenience of the schedule that really needs to be addressed. In terms of existing facilities, the Rota Resort and Country Club offers 57 suites and a beautiful golf course. This is supplemented by the Valentino Hotel and the Cora Garden Hotel, both of which enjoy good locations, along with a few restaurants, shops, and dive operators. Nature is where Rota really shines through. Its crystal clear water, wide sandy beaches, and lush green hills make Rota the perfect tropical paradise often imagined when people think of the Pacific Islands. With such untouched nature, Rota is also home to many wildlife, including seabirds and the samba deer, which is recognized as a vulnerable species by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. It is also home to the most complete collection of historical relics in the Marianas, with something from every culture that has had significant influence in shaping its heritage. This includes caves and latte stones from the ancient Chamorro age, a German chapel, a Spanish convent, and the Japanese sugar mill and naval van, amongst others, which is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And to round off these are festivals, such as the Coconut Festival, which showcases the fruit's importance to islanders through children's performances, great food, and competitions. Overall, Rota's greatest strength really comes from its pristine nature, its rich cultural heritage, and its friendly community. On the flip side, air access has been its greatest challenge, along with limitations in infrastructure with regards to developing larger projects. With that said, the island is ideal for small, unique upmarket tourism products that generate revenue for the community without compromising the environment. On the flip side, developments that do not align with Rota's overall positioning could lead to negative impacts on the environment and potential negative impacts on the community. With that in mind, let's take a look at recommendations for Rota, the niche, and beautiful. Starting with the guiding rationale of preserving the pristine environment and charms of the small community while improving the island's economy and lives of the residents by hosting sustainable, responsible, and community-based tourism. Given that natural beauty is Rota's biggest advantage, it is key that it be made a priority in terms of preserving the natural environment. With the natural beauty, Rota is able to offer a return to nature, upmarket experience that also emphasizes a harmonious relationship between the visitor and the residents. And this is part of what is called community-based tourism. It ties in perfectly with Rota's reputation as a friendly island and also as nature's treasure island. In terms of positioning, Rota is expected to be positioned at the premium end, towards the top end of the Marianas as an overall destination. It's expected to target sophisticated travelers who are looking to travel responsibly. These are people who want more exclusivity than Phuket and Bali, but are also looking for more meaningful experiences than that offered by the likes of Koh Samui, which is known for its luxury resorts. To successfully target these guests, Rota needs scheduled flights from both Guam and Saipan. Guam to benefit from more flight connections, and Saipan to make sure that upmarket guests coming to Rota has the potential to spend 1 to 2 nights in Saipan on the way. Ideally, these flights would be daily, but at a minimum, most days of the week. And ensuring that flight schedules allow for seamless international connections is critical. In the context of looking at Rota as part of a multi-island destination, Rota could be compared to some of the outer islands of Fiji, which are home to some of the country's most iconic resort properties. These properties really help to set the premium positioning of Fiji, and they're the ones that people think of when they think of Fiji as the perfect place for a special occasion trip. While in fact, these properties actually make up a small percentage of the whole accommodation inventory for the country, they are the image of Fiji as a multi-island destination. And I believe that Rota has the potential to be the same for the Marianas. From a market development perspective, a good example to look at is Kauai in Thailand. Located around 30 minutes by speedboat from Phuket, the two islands remain very much in their pristine state, as you can see from these pictures, very different from Phuket and Krabi, which are the two popular destinations nearby, both of them around half an hour away. The majority of the residents living on the island are still engaged in traditional ways of life, as living off of the land. For the smaller of the two islands, Koh Yanoi, its name really only became known with the development of one iconic property, the 56-room Six Senses Resort. Opened in 2007, the resort was completely self-sufficient from the very beginning, even producing its own drinking water purification system on site without the use of any bottled water at all. A key property under the Six Senses portfolio, which is a leading brand known for sustainable practices in the luxury tier, it is one of the highest yielding resorts in Southeast Asia with ADRs of over $600. In addition to the beautiful villas built into the hillside landscape, it offers many return to nature facilities and activities that are surprisingly very popular with these top-tier paying guests. For example, guests could collect eggs from the resort's own chicken farm to bring to breakfast in the morning. They can also collect mushrooms and herbs from the garden, And they can also join children's activities that involve building nests for the local bird, hornbill, and also community outreach programs where they could volunteer through programs arranged by the resorts for schools, also for beach cleanups. And this is really an example of how the resort has managed to survive very well in great connection with the community, given its luxury positioning in such a rural community. They've invested heavily in medical facilities, education, environmental projects, and conservation programs, having great staff benefits, actively maintaining strong bonds with the local community. One of the awards that they won recently was the Clean Water Project, where they installed over the last 10 years water purification systems for the community in schools, hospitals, churches, over 32 locations. Again, showcasing their conservation efforts as well as community involvement. And that's something that's key to such a property that has such a big influence on a small island. The success of the Six Senses Yanoi actually led to many other entrepreneurial ventures, with the opening of small, nature-based, family-oriented, locally operated properties on the island. Most of them are smaller than 10 rooms, with the more sizable ones listed in the table here. In terms of rate positioning, most of the properties fall within the $100 range, with a few villa-only products that are in the $200 to $300 range. For example, the Treehouse Villas and the 9 Hornbills Tented Camp with 7 tented camps. Once again, as you can see from the picture, that these are small and niche type of properties with specialty designs based around nature. Moving on to looking at the bigger island of Koh Yao Yai. This is even less developed. Tourism really only started in 2017 with the initiative that's a collaboration between the local community, the Thai Union, and the International Union for Conservation of Nature to help them have a kickstart in terms of tourism. But the idea for them is to encourage guests to experience local ways of living through activities like homestays, visits to sustainable fish farms, and educational tours. And that's really because the island itself and the residents have pretty much maintained its traditional way of living, which really gives them an opportunity to do this and differentiate from the other destinations nearby. Now, moving back to Rota, looking at the type of property that is ideal to be developed on Rota, there's 3 defining features for the type of property. First of all, a small property with 50 or less rooms, ideally in freestanding bungalow-style rooms, which could help limit development costs and also justify a higher room rate. Second, they need to be self-sufficient so as to not add to the pressure of Rota's existing infrastructure. And third, they need to be unique in design and or concepts. With design, as we can see in the pictures here and with previous example properties, it's really about basing the entire resort around a spectacular site, utilizing the site's unique feature, whether that's a cliff line or a major plant or sunset, sunrise views, or in this case on the left, a lake. It's really revolving the design around that. And Rota has the type of natural beauty that's necessary to support these type of small, unique properties positioned to target upmarket customers. Prime example of designing around the site is the Rock House Hotel in Jamaica. First opened in 1973 with just 13 thatched roof bungalow-style rooms, the property is expanded gradually over time to 8 acres and 40 rooms, but maintaining the original architectural style, which is what made it so iconic and was featured in so many movies. While the room interior, as we can see here, is quite simple, the experience of being able to snorkel right in front of your room is spectacular. And being a property that also maintains close ties with the community, it invests particularly in schools, and it's also brought significant economic benefits to the otherwise less developed region of Negril relative to areas in Jamaica such as Kingston and Ocho Rios. This was quite a rural, small community. Moving to the other end of the spectrum, where the uniqueness of the property really comes from the programs that are offered and the overall experience rather than the facilities. With the core of its concept being wellness, the 20-room resort in northern Thailand opened with humble facilities, but expanded over a period of 10 years. So features like saltwater pool, meditation pavilion, outdoor fire pit, floating yoga deck have taken time to be perfected over years, but have also become guest favorites. Once again, this property really excels in terms of the wellness programs that they offer, and you can have a whole week of 30, 40 plus programs to choose from in terms of emotional wellness as well as physical wellness. And this is the concept is built around it, and it's really worked well with international guests as well as regional residents, Thai residents from Bangkok as well as surrounding areas. Once again, the example properties show that there could be a wide range of possibilities, and this is what makes this type of product so interesting to upmarket guests. But overall, they are small and based around nature, and they need natural beauty and untouched environments and cultural assets to support the positioning in such a high market level. And Rota has the ideal setting for these type of properties with the right developer. In terms of scale, ideally we'd be looking at a top-tier inventory of around 100 to 200 rooms, targeting $200 to $300. So this would really be in the form of 2 to 3 iconic properties. And it would be supplemented by a number of smaller family-run properties, as was the case with Kauai that we've seen earlier. Now moving on to attractions. The rationale for developing any attraction on Rota is first of all that it's realistic to develop in the near future in terms of the resources that would be required. And number two, that it prioritizes the conservation of Rota's natural and cultural resources, being that this is one of its key advantages. Number three is that it's in line with the positioning to be a premium niche destination. So we want something that is one of a kind and more catered to a niche market. And lastly, that it's sustainable in the long run, both from an environmental perspective as well as a market potential perspective. Okay, given the relatively compact size of Rota and the high concentration of scenic spots throughout the island, relative to its size, the small community and the target premium positioning, the idea of offering the entire island, turning that into a nature reserve park at a premium market level centered around preservation, welcoming guests to explore on their own, a luxury that is not available at a lot of typical resort destinations. So the whole island would be for the guests to explore. Once again, this is also targeting the guests that want to travel responsibly, that want to have a harmonious relationship with nature while they're traveling. And the general public's interest with sustainability and responsible tourism has been growing, notably in recent years, and this is definitely the direction going forward. Now, marketing the entire island as a nature resort park geared towards upmarket individual travelers, the starting point is to first provide information throughout the island at lookout points, historical relics, and sections of the forest, highlighting knowledge on the Marianas heritage, information, interesting information on the environment, wildlife, fun facts about nature. With some possible activities, including the living forest, so designing hiking trails with information presented along the way on the ecosystem, plant, wildlife species that guests are likely to encounter. so that they can enjoy an interactive experience during their explorations. Activities could also include coastal walks and beach cleanups. Where possible, also opportunities to learn sustainable fishing practices and experimental visits to small family-run farms if that's available. Overall, also providing a small business center with information and also the ability to book activities or hire a community ambassador or nature guide for parts of their exploration if they want to. And lastly, the overall business model is to introduce a fee payable by all non-resident visitors that then goes into a fund that maintains the island and supports the community enhancement projects. To tie all of what Rota has to offer together in this reserve park, the idea is to develop a biking trail that connects most of the iconic lookout areas, cultural sites, historic relics, and scenic spots, and to offer guests the best way to experience all that Rota has to offer, and also encourage them to explore at a more leisurely pace, thereby extending the average length of stay. Rota already has so much to offer for people to explore, but if they can do so, at one's own pace while biking around in nature, that's expected to be a great draw for a lot of upmarket guests. And along the Heritage Biking Trail at Marchong Village, introduce a small visitor center that offers more information not only on the stones, but also on the heritage of the ancient Chamorro people and the way they lived back then. And also have residents on site available to talk to visitors and education programs for school groups. Now let's move on to look at the Northern Islands, how their truly unique landscape could add to the variety of offerings for the Marianas. In terms of access, while there is a landing strip on Pagan, the Northern Islands are also accessible by boat and is a favorite for those who love adventure fishing. At the moment, there are no existing infrastructure, but around 400 displaced residents would like to return given the opportunity. Looking at these photos, it's really a very impressive landscape and very different landscape to what you normally see in the tropical region for tropical islands, because these are volcanic islands, and that's really their natural beauty is what the strength is for the Northern Islands. They're completely untouched, their majestic, rustic looks offer completely different experiences from what people would expect for tropical islands, whether that's in the Maldives or in Southeast Asia. It's a very powerful landscape, and also they offer a large variety of sites and potential to host different types of activities. And this is really something that would attract the truly adventurous guests. The weakness, of course, is the limited possibilities in terms of hosting permanent tourism facilities in the medium term, given the infrastructure and the lack of residents. In terms of opportunities, though, there are opportunities to use the live aboard experience to introduce the Northern Islands to guests looking for true adventures. And through introducing them to these guests by providing unique, high-profile type of experiences, it could lead to further development opportunities for the Northern Islands. On the other hand, though, the threats being that it's a very volatile geological region, so the risks from natural disasters and any potential military component of Hagen would negatively impact any tourism undertakings in the area. With all of that in mind, let's move on to see what we've recommended for the Northern Islands. Discovery, the ultimate adventure of travel. The true luxury of Discovery, basically offering a live-on-board product where guests could explore the Northern Islands on sea vessels. With their unique, rugged landscape, the Northern Islands could be the perfect hidden treasures to discover for adventurous guests. This could become a signature experience of the Marianas, showcasing the true uniqueness of the destination. So in the medium term, with the conditions now, it's most ideal to offer a live abroad program or product. And then in the future, when the destination gains momentum and the Northern Islands become more known, to explore potential opportunities for permanent facilities. This would be positioned at the very top end of the market as the best way to experience the true Marianas in terms of being adventurous and as close to nature as possible. And it would be targeting guests who are real adventurers as well as special occasion guests. So I understand that 2 to 3 months of the year, the ocean conditions are more forgiving, that perhaps less adventurous guests could also get to see the Northern Islands, whereas the rest of the year, it would be for the real adventurers. Now, the live aboard adventure, basically, the idea is to have mid-scale live aboard yachts, that's in the 30-meter range, that would offer a capacity of around 8 to 10 cabins. Also the ability to safely dock in areas of the Northern Islands. And lastly, given the much rougher conditions than what you would normally expect for this type of product, which is widely available in the Maldives, ideally the vessel would be customized so that it could offer a little bit more comfort for guests during their journey. A reference product for the live aboard experience would be the Maldives. So around 6% of the accommodation offered in the Maldives are on these vessels. They originated from dive boats, but have become increasingly popular, especially with Asian younger generation guests, as well as executive retreat groups. Typically, each boat accommodates for 20 to 30 guests, and they stay on board for 6 to 7 nights, serviced entirely by the crew that's on board, usually 5 to 10 staff. Let's look at, for the Northern Islands, the recommendations for how this product will be. So as I mentioned, a mid-scale yacht in the 30-meter range, offering a capacity of 8 to 10 cabins. The cabins should be equipped with their own bathrooms as well as air conditioned, but they do not need to be luxurious, they just need to be comfortable. The other key area on these vessels are the public areas, both indoors and outdoors on the deck. And with the rougher sea conditions, it's important to have more built-in furniture, as shown in the picture on the bottom right corner. It's also expected to have a full kitchen as well as preparation area. Staff quarters, they need to be sufficient and comfortable for a number of staff, 5 to 10 staff that was mentioned. And also sufficient storage space for all the snorkel gear, possible diving gear. Also all the food for the entire journey, as well as beverages. All the preparation material for when they're dining off the boat, cooking utensils and any setup that's necessary. So lots of storage on the boat as well. Which brings us to the topic of dining experiences. So the idea is that dinner and breakfast would be mostly on board, but to have as many opportunities as possible to highlight the experience by having, for example, picnics on the beach, sunset drinks and barbecues on the beach. These are all highlights of the live aboard adventure. And of course, the activities, that's the real highlight of the trip, is exploring the Northern Islands. And the activities could be a great range, including exploring the mysterious black sand beach, hiking through untouched forests, looking at wildlife, and also viewing the volcanoes. There's a really wide range of activities to be had, in addition, of course, to snorkeling and diving all along the way. In terms of possible accommodation off of the boat, there's several opportunities. One is for camping for one night out of the entire journey, and this is more just a tented camp that's set up for the night. More ideally, though, would be to set up more self-contained permanent structures when demand picks up for the liveaboard product. So these are still, they don't require any infrastructure because they're self-contained trailers. But in the long term, as I mentioned, when tourism picks up for the Northern Islands with the liveaboard product and with more people coming to see the Northern Islands, there could be opportunities to develop large type of properties around the lake, for example. And this is a property that's located in Zambia by the national park. It's a lakeside property, a tented camp. That something like this would be really suited to the landscape as well as to the activities possible, kayaking, fishing, swimming in calmer waters. Let's move on to look at Tinian, the best locals getaway. So with Tinian, the idea is to position itself as an ideal resort destination for military guests, and as a natural extension from the Pika Festival, a fun-filled holiday getaway for the residents of the region. Now, this is mainly driven by the planned military component on Tinian. Because of this component, it's not ideal for traditional tourism development, especially considering the types of markets that the Marianas has. However, with it usually comes opportunities with military-related demand, R&R guests, as well as the segment of morale, welfare, and recreation. This alone is likely not going to sustain a property, so the idea is to supplement that with short-haul demand from weekend guests and short-haul holiday guests from the region, so regional residents. To effectively target both segments, they are very highly value-driven, so a mid-market property offering high value, once again targeting military-related demand and regional residents. And to target them, it's ideal to offer upper mid-tier property, branded resorts with a brand from one of the key hotel groups that has a strong loyalty program that's critical to the military segment, with an inventory of around 250 rooms. Ideally, this would need a beachfront site on the main stretch of beach on Tinian, and offering a fun, all-inclusive concept that's centered around great recreational facilities, very large swimming pools, generous deck areas, and food and beverage service throughout the day. Typically with these properties, guests tend to spend the majority of their time within the resorts if the resort is successfully developed. And this is why this idea or this concept has been recommended for Tinian, given that there's going to be limited areas where guests could explore with the military use on the other 2/3 of the island. In terms of facility highlights, really the idea is to emphasize on the outdoor recreational areas, having a separate family area and a separate adult-only zone, each with their own swimming pools that's generously sized, with a large deck with lots of lounge chairs and cabanas, and a swim-out bar. The other focus is food and beverage service, so that's buffets for the main meal periods and snacks and drinks throughout the day. Water sports options on the beach and activities. The room component is actually the more basic components of the concept, given that most of the guests do not spend as much time in their rooms for these properties generally. Here's a reference property for this product, the Club Med Punta Cana in Dominican Republic. As you can see from these photos, the room here is quite basic. It's a standard room of only 29 square meters, with a great focus on swimming pools, 2 large pools, separate areas, lots of different activities throughout the day, large restaurant space, generous bar areas. Again, targeting these guests, making sure that they have a great time for their short getaway, staying within the property. In terms of attractions, the opportunities to explore with Tinian are basically seeing if there could be opportunities to develop the North Fields. And also with House of Taga to develop it into a more well-rounded attraction by establishing once again a visitor center with more interactive information and also educational programs for visiting school tours as well as for guests. And the compared to the previous two attractions, I think something that really has great potential to be expanded into a larger attraction is the Pika Festival, which has been very successful. So to build on the success of that and making it into potentially a longer duration festival with more activities, an example of that is the Paloa Plantation Days in Kauai. This was started many years ago. 2019 was the 34th year for this festival, and it is now a 10-day event. So during this festival, there's a lot of outdoor activities, a lot of community gatherings. Most of the businesses, resorts in the area open their doors to guests and residents. It's a time really for the community to gather. So the idea is that the Pika Festival and Tinian being a locals getaway really creates an opportunity for the entire community, the multi-island destination, to get together and celebrate the Marianas. Now moving on to Saipan, envisioned to be the improved Demerel of the Marianas. Demerel is the most established tourism area in Fiji. As I mentioned earlier, Rota could be envisioned as more the outer islands of Fiji with a more premium product. But in Fiji, the bulk of its quality supply on the main island is actually located in Demerel, that was developed in the 1970s, 1980s, very similar to Saipan. But the difference being that over the years, especially in recent years, it's had extensive renovations to its facilities to make sure that it stays competitive. Because in the past, similar to Saipan, while the occupancy performance has been strong, its rate has been really constricted by the older facilities. They do have brands. Out of the 9 properties, 7 of them are branded international global brands. But there were facilities that were from the 80s and early 90s. So the renovations really helped them to improve in terms of ADR. And this is how, in terms of being a part of a multi-island destination, Saipan is envisioned as. It is the hub relative to getting into the Marianas, and it is the largest inventory and has the largest amount of activities. It's going to be hosting the bulk of visitors to the Marianas, and it's going to offer a fun, high-energy product. But in order to do so, it really needs to be transformed into a high-quality destination with upgraded facilities, amenities, but retaining a natural charm that's lost to many overdeveloped islands. So overall, to revitalize, to achieve vibrancy and quality, with the number 1 item being the upgrade and branding of existing facilities, followed by the redevelopment, cleanup of unfinished or disused developments, and followed finally by ensuring that any new development is of high quality. In terms of the positioning, as I mentioned earlier, it's going to offer the largest scale in terms of inventory in the Marianas, but it is going to offer quality. And this is going to be targeting experienced leisure travelers and meeting groups. So compared to Saipan's current market mix, with the upgrade, with the revitalization, there should be an increase in FIT travelers who are higher yielding than the traditional wholesale and tour group guests that Saipan attracted in the past. And with the branding of major resorts, that should help with really attracting meeting group demand, which once again the market has missed out on in the past, given its facility limitations as well as the lack of brands. looking at accommodation facilities, and specifically, the idea is to achieve the best use of the existing inventory. Once again, Saipan has limited land available for new development, and actually the majority of its prime shoreline real estates are occupied by some of its key resorts. So it's really a good idea to focus on making the best use of what's already been built, starting with the upgrading and branding of shoreline properties. And the upgrading and branding of these properties could really lead to improvements in ADR performance, as I mentioned, for Fiji, for example, for General. And in Saipan alone, you could see this taking place with the example of the Kensington Resort, which offers the most modern facilities, even though it has a weaker location relative to being in Garapan. Its rate performance has done very well relative to the rest of the leading properties in the market. Next is to really try to utilize the currently non-operational properties. These are for example, the Marianas Resort, Coral Ocean Point, which has been under renovation, as well as properties that haven't been completed. Because these are properties that sit on some of the most prime sites in Saipan, it's critical that they be utilized to achieve the best use of what's existing on the island. And lastly, to make sure that any new developments are of high quality and avoiding unrealistic, excessively sized developments. It's a similar story for the attractions. So for Saipan, given that it is the island that's going to host the majority of visitors to the Marianas, and it's also home to the majority of residents, it needs a few signature attractions that can become key revenue generators, while the other areas of the island, for example, could be kept more resident-centric. So it's very different from Tinian and Rota, where there are smaller communities and guests could explore more without having as huge an impact on the community. So at the moment, in terms of beach sites and snorkel dive sites, Managaha is the actively managed one. There could be potential to consider actively managing additional sites because guests are already going to these beaches, snorkeling, swimming, or diving. But by actively managing them, really introduces a revenue source that could be put towards the preservation of the environment and the better management in terms of whether there are sustainable measures put in place. Once again, last time at the council meeting, I presented the development plan for Marpi, and that is an example of really sustainably using the natural resources to have a sustainable attraction that really adds to the offering of the Marianas. Moving on to the amenities, the story is also that because Saipan is home to the majority of the residents in the Marianas, it's important that the amenities are not just touristic, that they are for everyone to enjoy, including the residents. And in order to do so, the first step is really to begin revitalizing Garapan, the core of Garapan, and then after that, moving beyond central Garapan. Introducing more community event spaces, for example, and also offering more high street and off-brand retail brands, as well as food and beverage brands. At the moment, the offerings are either at the luxury level, and previously at DFS, or they're very tourist-centric products with limited high street brands available. And lastly, to really improve amenities, not just for tourists, but for everyone to enjoy, and to make sure that future growth in tourism arrivals could be sustained relative to the island's traffic conditions, really looking at installing a bike system and a shuttle bus system. Okay, so let's, now that we've looked at each island on its own. Let's bring it all in and look at development issues for each island relative to the overall destination, that's the Marianas. Starting with access requirements. Beginning with Saipan, really being the key hub for the Marianas, it's key to have daytime scheduled flights in key cities in Asia, as well as scheduled flights with Guam. And moving on to Tinian, also critical to have scheduled flights with Guam given its expected military focus, and with Saipan to have ferry service at least on the weekends and on holidays when large volumes of guests are expected to travel to Tinian. Moving on to Rota, as mentioned earlier, it's critical to have daily scheduled flights, if not most days of the week, with Guam as well as Saipan to sustain its premium positioning. And these flights need to be timed so that they connect very well with international flights coming in and leaving. And finally, for the Northern Islands, in the medium term, just the ability to dock vessels on demand. Next, moving on to development timeline. In the most urgent term, really is the upgrading of existing properties in Saipan and the utilization of key shoreline inventory. This is the island that has the largest amount of supply, and it is the island where the majority of guests arrive into. So it is a critical item in the immediate term. Also, the cleanup of Central Garapan and the development of more amenities and attractions, as I talked about earlier. But really, the efforts that could change the overall destination in terms of raising its market positioning is developments on the other islands. Rota, for example, looking at over the next 2 years. And the recommendations are realistic to implement because they're smaller in scale. They could be more realistic to execute in the short to medium term. In the next 3 to 5 years, when tourism achieves full recovery and air access reaches a stable level where sophisticated luxury tier travelers could get to the Marianas from various hubs in Asia on daytime flights, these are the ideal prerequisites for having the live aboard product or experience for the Northern Islands. And then over the next 5 to 10 years, when some of the Northern Islands are populated, looking at the potential of having more permanent facilities, like I've shown earlier, potentially lakeside lodges that are also based around ecotourism, but offer a more permanent presence on the Northern Islands. Looking at branding and target rate positioning, for Saipan and Tinian, branding or management under globally established hotel brand is critical to the products that's recommended and for the market segments that they will be targeting. As I mentioned, it is still going to be targeting the bulk of the market. And in the case of Tinian for military demand, these, especially for military and tour groups, as well as leisure travelers, loyalty programs for these upper mid-tier products are really key because guests are looking to use their points that they've gained during business travel on leisure trips. They need to, in order for the destination to improve, there needs to be brands that people who've never been to the destination before have trust in. So all of this really plays into how critical it is for Saipan and Tinian to have branded properties. In the case of Rota and the Northern Islands, management under a niche brand is beneficial, but not critical in this case. As I mentioned, a lot of the smaller properties, they are unique, they're one of a kind, they're usually developed by passionate owner-operators, and they could be unbranded because that is part of the charm of these small boutique properties. However, association with marketing platforms such as leading hotels of the world, and in the Northern Islands case, the Live Aboard website, which is a global platform featuring all the different products available in different regions, such associations would be considered beneficial. Moving on to looking at the rate positioning, we have Tinian, the upper mid-tier property position around the $150 range. And moving up to Saipan, looking at for the renovated and branded properties, looking at a range closer to the $200 mark. And that's compared to branded shoreline resorts in Guam, which are doing about $200 to $250, and branded renovated resorts in Demerara and Fiji, which are doing $170 to $200. So that's with the renovation and branding, looking at least a $50 premium to what the market did at its highest point. Moving up to Rota, we mentioned earlier, smaller, unique settings for villa inventory looking at $200 to $300 range, being the premium product of the Marianas. And then finally, at the very top end, the liveaboard experience for the Northern Islands priced at the premium end around $500 a night. Linking everything back to the community initiatives, for the Marianas. So first looking at the larger island of Saipan, because it's a larger island with a more established community, really the initiatives would be focused on on having more employment, providing more amenities for residents to enjoy, encouraging the sale of locally produced products, working with schools, developing educational programs, and hosting community events to really focus on improving the quality of life for its residents. But on the right-hand side here, looking at the more underdeveloped areas, like Rota, for example, tourism developments should really have greater involvement in the community. First of all, being completely self-sufficient and having a more active role in the preservation efforts in terms of environmental preservation, because Rota's pristine environment is what sustains a high positioning for these type of properties. Improving the public facilities, for example, and training and retaining local talent, which, as mentioned, is expected to be one of the challenges. And finally, integrating with the community, as I've shown with the smaller properties earlier, that is really key for them to be loved by the community and work well with the community. And finally, in the case of the Northern Island, encouraging repopulation of the islands. And bringing it all together, looking at a sustainable development target for the Marianas. So looking at the target visitor arrival level. So this really takes into consideration that the Marianas has limitations in resources, particularly natural resources and labor. It's critical to preserve the environment, which is the main support for its tourism product. The importance of improving the quality of life for its residents, the benefits of attracting higher spending visitors, and a critical point is looking at the historical arrival of the Marianas as an estimate on reasonable capacity for the existing infrastructure. So taking all of that into consideration, we then go one step further and compare visitor arrivals versus population versus land area versus tourism spending for 10 other destinations, as we can see in the table here. So this can be broken down to a few categories, starting with the pristine. For example, destinations that fall into this category, they have around 100 to 500 visitors per square mile. So this ratio, while it's not scientific by any means, it is a ratio that clearly reflects how pristine a destination is, as we will see. So for Fiji, for Paloa, for French Polynesia, it's really remaining in the very pristine spectrum. Moving on to this group of Guam, Maldives, and Kauai. Kauai is quite in between the pristine and the group of Guam and Maldives, because it's a destination that's really emphasized quality over quantity, as I presented over the last council meeting. So compared to Guam and the Maldives, its visitor arrivals to land ratio is still quite manageable at 2,500 visitors per square mile. Guam and Maldives really now fall into the more aggressive growth category. So for the Maldives, for example, prior to having the possibility to have guest houses on main islands, it was strictly a one island, one resort luxury destination. And that changed in 2008. And since then, tourism really, arrivals really grew very strongly. So from 1.1 million, actually from just under 700,000 in 2007 to 1.1 million in just 4 years, and then to past 1.7 million in 2019. At the same time, though, occupancy at its top tier luxury properties didn't grow. It dropped because of the large amount of new openings. I think in 2019 alone, it had 15 resorts open. And Guam is with 30% of its land leased for military use. Its remaining land of around 140 square miles welcomed nearly 1.7 visitors. And then at the very right here are the Southeast Asian destinations that we also talked about in the last council meeting that were examples of destinations that really suffer from over-tourism. Boracay, for example, a 4 square mile island with over 2 million visitors. Now, what about for the Marianas? Tourism arrivals peaked at 730,000 in the late 90s. Now, 20 years later, with aging infrastructure, limited availability of labor, all the similar challenges, and also given the passing of time, less non-renewable natural resources, unless there's a significant overhaul to the entire infrastructure, it's not realistic to expect that the system could comfortably accommodate visitor volumes surpassing the previous peak. So the idea then is to focus on growing tourism revenue through the growing of tourism spending rather than just visitor arrivals alone. And if we look at, from the previous table, there was a figure on estimated tourism spending per visitor. The figure for the Marianas is 40% behind the next highest destination, which was Guam. And the figure for the Marianas was computed from 2011 figures by inflation. So this once again shows how much room there is to grow. And in terms of improving tourism spending, there's ways to improve it by growing rate and also by increasing the average length of stay. As a point of comparison, the average length of stay for Fiji is nearly 10 nights, and it's over 6 nights for the Maldives. So for the Marianas, and the following are the target overnight visitor arrivals. So for Saipan, looking at about 700,000 visitors, that would then support an occupancy of about 75% for about 4,000 guest rooms. So this 4,000 guest rooms basically consists of the current supply, that's all the existing shoreline properties and a few non-shoreline properties that's part of HAMI, plus about 1,200 non-HAMI properties, which are predominantly smaller non-oceanfront properties, taking into account half of this 1,200 rooms. In addition to the key currently non-operational properties that I mentioned earlier, those adds up to another 1,000 rooms. So these all add up to about 4,000 rooms. And that's without any of the additional new developments that's not mentioned in the previous list. So we need about 700,000 arrivals just to get to a 75% occupancy to sustain about 4,000 rooms. Moving on to Tinian, we mentioned having an inventory of about 250 rooms and upper mid-tier branded property. To get to about 70% occupancy for that property, Tinian would need about 36,000 arrivals. For Rota, if we're looking at 2 to 3 iconic properties, smaller scale properties totaling about 150 rooms in the top tier sector, supplemented by smaller family-run properties, we're going to be looking at about 22,000 arrivals. And for the Northern Islands, once again, this is computed by looking at one liveaboard product that's operating about half of the year, given the demand and tidal conditions. So overall, we'd be looking at a combined visitor arrival of just under 750,000 for the Marianas and a average length of stay of 5 to 6 nights. Moving on quickly to development issues, it's really about preserving the environment, avoiding over-tourism, ensuring that new developments on any of the islands are of high quality, and future-proofing the destination, which means all the developments, all the ideas that we talked about today, that's part of future-proofing for the Marianas, and that's really addressing upgrading the destination so that it could be competitive with regional destinations. Especially post-COVID, when people start traveling again, they're going to be more choosy in terms of which destinations they go to. When travel becomes slightly more difficult, they're going to be taking less trips but looking for higher quality trips. So really, it's avoiding the previous model of tour group travel and gearing up for competition for the new generation of travelers that are looking at responsible tourism, that are looking at sustainable destinations. And this is where the Marianas really has the competitive advantage over destinations, for example, in Southeast Asia that are overdeveloped. It has relatively pristine environments that gives it the opportunity to showcase itself as a model of sustainable development. And this is really, the picture here really shows, a future of responsible and sustainable travel is going to be overtaking the previous model of depletion of tour groups going in large volumes to pristine areas. And let's now look at the synergies between the different islands. So with the products recommended for Rota and the Northern Islands, that could completely change the views of consumers on the Marianas, which in the past have been focused predominantly on Saipan. So looking at the new multi-island destination, what the Marianas is expected to offer is niche luxury retreats for top-tier guests looking for unique experiences on Rota, and this is going to be complemented by even more adventurous experiences on the Northern Islands, and returning to the bulk of supply for the Marianas, quality beach holidays for leisure travelers and extensive groups on Saipan, finally rounded out by fun, high-value getaways for regional residents and military guests on Tinian. So all of these need to be tied together into one clear identity for the entire destination, an identity that is clear, simple, and easy to remember. Everything that the Marianas has to offer needs to also be integrated into an official one-stop shop type of travel website in terms of what the destination, everything that the multi-island destination offers. An example of this is the official travel website for Fiji. As you can see here, it categorizes things to do. For example, showcasing nature in terms of challenges, in terms of bird watching, national parks, marine parks. It also has a wish list function that's great for people planning and dreaming about traveling. It also lists the different areas of Fiji, their characteristics, their features. It also characterizes things by interest, like snorkeling, and in the case here, by accommodation by island. And all of these businesses that's listed, whether it's a service provider or it's accommodation, they all have to provide a standardized list of information that's then presented to the consumer in a standardized format, so that all the information is really in one stop. so that when planning for their holidays, people can easily see these are the things that I could do and I could organize my trip here. And all of them have a function with a booking button to take the guests to the operator's website for booking. Now lastly, given the relatively large differences in positioning level and target guests, it could be important for each island of the Marianas to consider having its own team dedicated to tourism, but working together to make sure that the Marianas is a well-rounded destination offering a variety of complementary experiences, which then brings us to have a final wrap-up for my presentation to take a look at some exciting itineraries. For example, spending 5 nights on Rota and 1 night on Saipan on the way out. Biking around Rota, enjoying the resorts, having a day out on the boat, continue to explore Rota. That's 5 nights. And then flying to Saipan, getting to enjoy Saipan for the day, and then having a morning or afternoon departure. And to an even more adventurous plan, 4 nights on the northern island, so basically sailing every night, getting to a different island every day and exploring the island, exploring around the island, and then sailing back to get to Rota and spending 3 nights on Rota before leaving out of Saipan. Once again, these are all products that really top-tier destinations such as Fiji, such as the Maldives offer guests. And this is something that the Marianas could also offer guests with the addition of islands like Rota and the Northern Islands, incorporating them into the overall multi-island destination that's the Marianas. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much. I'd like to have more discussions with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darlena.
Thank you.
And welcome back live to us on Zoom from Hong Kong. So, Mr. Chairman, I will go ahead and open the floor for questions and discussion with Darlena, Council. Anybody?
Hi, Darlena.
Hi.
Hi, I want to thank you for the work that you've done. I was sharing this with Chairman. There's a lot of research that you've done and very specific recommendations. And I'm very impressed with the way you incorporate the military on Tinian, understanding the realm of their involvement on long term, the 2/3 of military, and really it's really impressive the way you market each island, including Northern Islands. I look forward to working with you more, and I hope that we have the senators here. And actually, this is a great time for Senator Victor Holcook and Senator Cruz, also Senator Vinny, to also chime in and see what kind of tourist marketing they would also like to see for Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and even the Northern Islands. I just wanted to comment on the work that you've done. It's a lot of research, but more so the recommendation in appreciating each island's uniqueness. So I wanted to share that with you.
Thank you so much.
Darlena, maybe good evening there or good afternoon, but here, that's right. It's early morning. So this is Mayor Ephraim Atali for the island of Rota. And just like the governor mentioned, I really want to thank you for the hard work that you have done into this presentation. And you really opened my mind about what Rota can offer to the tourists. And I'll just let you know, want to let you know that we have been doing some of the recommendations that you have mentioned, such as the biking and the overall ecotourism in Rota. So I would like to ask the chairman if I could get a copy of this presentation, Chairman. Yeah, so because it's really important that we show the residents here or the directors here in the island so we can form a local tourism to help guide the tourism industry here in the Marianas. So again, thank you very much, and God bless you. We really appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I think just as a series of videos and presentations that Darlene has been commissioned to conduct, this is a third in a series of commissioned reports. And our hope is that this recording that was done could be utilized by each of the senatorial districts as a component to marketing the opportunities. And I think there's a way that we could possibly even dice into cutting it out for specific islands. But in line with the vision, I think, behind CEDA, you know, a lot of the niche items that we're talking about are not multi-$100 million operations. We're talking about 10, 50, maybe top end. And I think with Governor's vision, administration, again, the outlook for CEDA would be to utilize that division of government, if you will, autonomous agency of government, to utilize these videos, this packaging, and really focus in on working with NBA, administration, and CEDA to go out into the marketplace and see if we can devise this effort and grow each of these islands for this multi-island destination within the time span we're talking about. I mean, this is, as Darlene has pointed out, very realistic. And with ARPA funding, possibly with lending that could possibly be provided for in the region, I really believe that if we put a full court press behind this, if everybody sees the vision in it and adopts it and endorses it, that we could actually implement this very quickly. So I'm hopeful that this is something we can move forward as GCEA, and that, you know, again, I think the governor is already behind it in effect, but that we can really push this effort forward. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, Darlena.
Good morning.
This is Senator Hokok from Rota. And I just want to also extend my sincere appreciation for all the studies that you've been conducting. And equally like to extend also my full appreciation to Mr. Jerry Tan and his group for searching for you to conduct this economic development. And I'm glad that you come on board to assist us. And having the governor form this economic council, advisory council, will pave really the objective of trying to meet the council's plan to make the cinema a world-class tourist destination. But in order to accomplish that, I'm saying that I think that the time frame is, for me, is short to really come up with all those recommendations that you have provided for the council. And to us here, number two, and the reason that I said that is that we are also challenged with all those ideas that you presented to us. We are really challenged, you know, with the permitting requirement. And I hope that the governor can also meet with the permitting agency to see how we can reduce, you know, the time frame we will not disappoint investment from moving forward, or most of the recommendations that you have provided us are really being searched from investors. But due to our difficult requirement, sometimes we end up seeing them move away. Nonetheless, we have prominent investors or investment in Saipan that is with us here, like the Tan Holding and Kensington and other investment. But we need to relax more of our regulatory system. And one thing I like to look into it is the type of development that you showcase for us in Fiji and other places here. We have areas here in Rota that can depict most likely like what we have seen in your presentation. But due to the difficult regulatory requirement from our CRM, BCQ, and all this, prevented those kind of dream to see Rota become one of the unique development in that kind of service provider in our tourist industry. Like, you know, I don't know if you've been to Rota. Have you been to Rota, Darlene?
I have tried to go many times. Every time I've been to Saipan, yeah, because of the flights. I've really tried to go. I would love to go next time I go. Really love to see it in person.
Okay, for the benefit of the people that are here, especially Mr. Brian from Kensington, that is the first time here. Also, I like you that when you come to the cinema to visit us, and I would like to visualize, share my vision with you as compared to a development in Fiji or what was that area? The other? Thailand. You know, in the entrance of the village, we have small rock islands. Okay, that at one given time, I dream of putting those bungalows in every rock stone there, connected with a walkway. And our challenge is the permitting agency, whether we can do it or can't. Secondly, the challenge is how we can protect that investment during inclement weather. But that's not my job. That's the developer's job, to work into it, how to make that development work without any future disaster to its guests. But that's one area. The entrance of Samsung Village is one of the unique areas that we can showcase visitors. And Paloa with all the other development on the coastline that you have shown us. But again, the issue there is our permitting agencies, you know, whether we can or we can't do it. But I'm pretty sure that to every requirement, there is a solution. It's just that we're not trying harder to make it happen. And the first impression is that when an investor comes to showcase those kind of ideas, we conclude that, oh, that's difficult because of the requirements. So there are times that they just back up and leave that dream, you know, that Rota should have benefited and go other places to develop. So maybe I'd like to expand this discussion also with the administration as to the right of the 3-mile zone that we have. What can we do to deregulate some of those requirements? And if we can do deregulation and impose only the CNMI, not to disregard the environmental issues, but if we can be allowed to do what we think and visualize to create this tourism growth in the Marianas. Particularly, you make mention that Rota is one of the assets that can steal tourism, you know, and embrace other islands in the CNMI to try to meet the number of tourists that we can see development and economic prosperity for the island and the people in the whole Mariana Islands. And I cannot disagree with you that Pagan is a good destination, if developed, to be, that can create a high-end tourist destination. There are a lot of people, even in the CNMI, that we can present to them if we provide the necessary transportation that our own local people can take a trip to Pagan and spend 3-4 nights there. Not only our outside tourism, but our very own people that have never seen the Northern Islands. There are people that grew up old and never see their own CNMI. It's here. So with the idea, the governor is trying to, and the help of Mr. Jerry Tan and his team, I hope that we can open the gateway to traveling by air to Pagan and have this opportunity to our own people. Like you said, I cannot disagree with you more on the issue of developing Rota to become a more known destination for the fact that we lack the essential air transportation. I just want to share with you the economic team that the governor, myself, are undergoing now a proposal that will address a frequent air service, not only to Rota, but from Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and all the way to Guam, with a more reliable and dependable schedule. And I hope that in a very, very soon, we can come up with an agreement to ensure another airline services and join the present air service that is now serving Rota and Tinian and Guam. But like you said, the lack of scheduling of the airline that is servicing us today prevented more opportunity for Rota to grow and create more tourists, what do you call this, or to showcase the island because of the flight schedule. So that prevented Rota also from moving forward. And I really appreciate, and I am with you in all the studies that you have put up together, and we are more than, the Rota leadership along with the Commonwealth Legislature are more than willing to come together, work together, and move forward with legislation requiring what is needed to make the CNMI, a world-class tourist destination. And I hope to meet the challenge with the Governor's Council that within a period of 10 years, we can come to closer in meeting at least 80% of what the Council is timeframes proposing to see fully developed. I'd just like to share that with you, and I hope that next time you come to the Marianas that you make time to visit Rota. And I'll make time.
Yes, definitely.
I'll make time to come along with you to make sure that you come.
Yes, definitely. I really wish to go. I always try to make time, but like you mentioned, your air access was quite difficult. But I definitely it's on my top wanting to do list.
Yeah. So thank you, and I hope that the Economic Council also look into addressing investment that are coming in, expressing interest to develop, and how we can mitigate their development plan if it can't be done immediately, but I am confident that working together we can address the glitches of whatever is required for this product to move forward. If we don't have this investment from outside, we can invest locally, but we cannot see what you have put up together to meet the quota to ensure that the CNMI move forward with its needed tourist destination, world-class tourist destination. So again, to the council, we appreciate if the council would come up with any legislation that is needed to move and meet the time frame of this development. We are more than happy to work forward with you guys. Thank you, Darlene, and continue to share with us what you think is more feasible, attainable, and memorable to do in terms of economic development in the tourism industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Governor Chairman Jerry, with the members of this council for the opportunity to be part of this meeting today. And after hearing the presentation by Alex, I appreciate all the information that I learned today. And I hope that with the presentation that you mentioned about Tinian, it's not an ideal location for tourism because of military development. And that's not really concerned. I appreciate that information, and I hope that the government and the council, and along with the Filipino leadership, see what we can do. I know it's a fact that there will be a military development, and see what we can do. Try and get this development going, because I'm worried about future development and present development that is happening in Tinian, and it worries me if it's not really an ideal for tourism. And I don't know what's going to happen to those developers that are moving forward today and future development. So again, I appreciate the information that you presented this morning. Usmase.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, Darlene. Senator Vinny from the 3rd Senatorial District, Island of Saipan and the Northern Islands. I was listening to your presentation.
Good morning.
Good morning. I was listening to your presentation, and I'm very impressed with the information that you came up with. It seemed like just by you speaking of speaking about the CNMI, I thought you've been to all the islands here. I mean, you're aware of a lot of the issues and concerns and opportunities here in the CNMI, and it's a great plan. It's a great vision for us to really see and hope that we can attain something in this magnitude. As you were speaking, I was trying to think of the feasibility. What are the factors of even attaining, this precious vision? There's a lot of things going on right now. The pandemic. These are the things we have to look into before we invest. And I wanted to ask: is this a timeline? I know there was some timelines thrown in and out of your presentation: 5 years, 10 years, 3 years. But is this something where we should go in phases? And what I really want to learn from you is the outlook of tourism in general. how many years do you see, or when can we see actual tourists traveling in? I know we have these ideas of the tourism bubbles and stuff like that, but in your expert opinion, how is the industry in general looking in order to attain these goals that you've set forth?
Thank you. I think for your question in terms of resuming, it's been the hot topic now for I guess since mid-last. I've attended several Zoom conferences, industry conferences. Again, this year, people are talking about the timeline, and I think that really it's been obviously pushed back worldwide in terms of resuming travel. But I think the one thing that everyone is doing is they're preparing for things to open. So even though when things are opening, really it depends on some areas have new outbreaks or vaccine or things like that. I think what we agreed on in all these Zoom conferences that I attended is that everybody is during this low period in terms of preparing for when travel opens up again, and everybody is confident that travel is going to be resuming, perhaps with some changes compared to before, which is why, like I mentioned in my presentation, in terms of leisure travel, where everyone's quite on the same page in terms of many people becoming more selective in terms of where they go, compared to, for example, in the past, maybe I'm willing to more and trips, shorter trips to easier destinations that may be just average. I now will be looking at maybe I'm taking less trips, but longer trips, and definitely I want to go to a destination that's going to be a guaranteed good experience for me. So I think in a lot of areas, including the ones that I mentioned, for example, Thailand, Fiji as well, they've been undergoing a lot of renovation during the downtime to prepare for when things open again. And it's to make sure that you are competitive when things do open. And I think that's, on an industry level, that's one of the few things that can be done now, because there's not much you could do in terms of influencing when borders open up or when travel bubbles open up. That was the main discussion that I've had on these recent Zoom conferences, is that people are really preparing for it, even though it is kind of unknown in terms of a timeline, but it is critical to be prepared when it does happen. I hope that is a little bit of your question.
Yes. Thank you for that. And the whole vision that's in front of us. It's great that you just said that other jurisdictions are adjusting and restructuring for when the actual tourism industry relaunches. It's going to be a new, what we're going through now with, with this pandemic. It's the industry is going to relaunch it to almost a newer style or a newer traveler right now, and for the Governor's Council of Economic Advisors, through your expertise, to have this vision and to be prepared for when that kind of launches is very valuable. So I'm looking forward to to the vision and to the plan, and for the CNMI to be competitive with these other jurisdictions. I think we have something very, very bright in front of us, and the opportunity is now. So, I'm like the Senator Hokuk said, I'm eager to kind of get all of this off the ground, and I think we should be in good times soon, and that's what we're hopeful for. Is to make sure that when our visitors start flying, then we'll be prepared to receive them. So, thank you, Chairman, everybody. I would have to excuse myself early. I'm going to catch the noon flight back to Saipan with Senator Cruz. So, thank you for having us here, Governor.
just wanted to outline to Senator Hoko's point about legislation. I'm hopeful that we can move forward the legislation that Lee Pon Guerrero has put forward, looking at the current situation in Sinamai. So last year, DPL put forward a certified question to the Attorney General's office, and it was a request to look at the high water mark and the ability for Department of Public Lands to actually engage in leasing of public lands within the high water mark. That certified question was answered by Attorney General Manabusan, and it basically came back with somewhat a negative approach to it, in the sense that DPL within the current laws does not have the ability to lease and or charge fees and or conduct any type of development within the high water mark by virtue of the laws you speak of. And so we're hopeful that in this discussion that we're having with the House Committee and future Senate committees on this point, we understand the Pandora's box could possibly be opened here by having development within the high water mark. But to Senator's point, I think there's quite possibly a way to devise this legislation so that we're looking at marquee type of development. We're not looking at hodgepodge kind of stuff. And so if we could have a meeting of the minds, if you will, about the various islands and their uniqueness in the way we developed. I mean, if you took into account, if this legislation actually, if this certified question were to actually be implemented full stop, we're talking about the World Resort not having a water park today, because that is built within the 150-foot high water mark, or to BCQ's level that is within the high tide mark. And so to these many different examples we have shoreline, again, I absolutely agree that we should not allow for just any type of development, but I think if we could list the types of development that make sense, that could be mitigated to meet storm surge, that you could put things on stilts, that you could build with resilience behind development shoreline, that we're missing out on the opportunity of really being unique, like Rota, like the Jamaica property, there is a Thailand property like it, but Jamaica is another example that has the bungalows on the rock line. So I'm hopeful that we can move this legislation forward, have meaningful additions to it, and actually make it law so that we can conduct some of this development we are talking about and be very strategic with it going forward, because there is not, I think, the ability to truly capture the uniqueness of Luta without that type of development available shoreline. So hopefully we can work on that as the next successful piece of legislation after CEDA. Thank you.
Sorry, if I could, listening to what Alex said about the two properties that I put up, the Jamaica one and Six Senses Young Noi. So with these type of properties, the value of the property and how they get such a high room rate, in fact, revolves around the site itself. So experienced developers coming in know very well the importance of preserving the site. So actually, for example, the Six Senses property as well as the Jippa one, they were built around the site and into the site. So with minimal changes actually to the landscape, they wanted to preserve as much as possible and to make sure that when guests come, it looks like the property, is in complete harmony with nature and the site has been here for a long time. One of the comments about properties is how they look in terms of working with the environment and making sure that all the operational practices at these resorts are sustainable and they are working to preserve the nature that really supports the rate positioning and the entire business. I think that's something to really take into consideration, is that for these type of properties, they're specifically sensitive to the environment and to the site that they sit on.
Okay, Galina, just like everybody else, really appreciate the time that you put in. Obviously, it takes a lot of research, and it's amazing that some of these places you've never been to, but you present like, you know, an expert. Just imagine if you actually spend time on even not just coming to Rota, but even going to Northern Island with the governor. He's the expert with Northern Island and want to show you how beautiful up there.
Ah, love to go. Yeah, love to go.
And all the council members have to go together. Mayor, you asked for a copy of the presentation. We will definitely make this available for everyone, all the council members, you know, all the mayors, all the political leaders, all the senatorial, congressmen and senators too. Because what we want is to make sure that we get all the feedback. Most of us are living in Saipan, so what do we know about Rota compared to you, Mayor, and the rest of the people here from Rota? Same for Tinian and Northern Island. So the video presentation is not really to say that this is the plan, this is the recommendation. So we definitely hope to get feedback so that we can adjust the plan based on all the I would call you the expert of Rota. And so the presentation will definitely be made available for everyone. And air service continue to be a topic of discussion that Galina will probably need to also drill in a little bit more. But air service is really a chicken and egg issue. Okay, so why should I fly when there's no tourists? But how am I going to bring in tourists when there's no air service? So we have to understand, it's a chicken and egg. But at the end of the day, the big question really is, do we believe in this presentation? Okay, and Rota, for example, back in the 90s, I think, there was charter flight directly from Narita, jet service. And one time I checked, somebody mentioned to me there were 27,000 tourists, mainly Japanese, I believe, at that time. And even the investor came from Japan to develop some of the properties here. And Dalina's target is 22,000 for Rota. Well, Rota used to have more than 22,000. So, talk about being realistic and achievable, right? But it's not about only Rota. We're talking about Northern Island, we're talking about Tinian, alongside with Saipan, because this is about Marianas as a multi-island destination. And personally, I'm very excited because just like in business, you always ask yourself, what's your competitive advantage? Why are you better than your competitor? Okay, that's always one question, right? And Guam is always our, if not, number one competitor. Because people think if I go to Guam, I don't have to go to Saipan, and vice versa. Okay, right? We mentioned a lot of other competitors. And being multi-island, I always envy Hawaii because they are multi-island destination. And we have that opportunity. And Dalina's recommendation clearly point out the realistic opportunity and the positioning, right? She point out what type of development, but she also point out the type of room rate that we may be targeting from $150 up to $500, right? So this is really a long-term vision that we need to have all stakeholders, including our residents, to agree, to have the buy-in from them, and understand whatever we recommend. Governor and I always talk, even though we are talking about world-class destination and tourism destination, but we're talking about quality of life for our residents. So that's why, Alina, your presentation also talk about a lot of community involvement, community engagement. And that's really the key. Yeah, but because the council should not only recommend what is good for an investment only, and has to be good also for the resident. And it's very, very realistic that can be achieved. But it has to be very responsible and carefully studied. And that's why Dalina also pointed out there are destinations that have over-tourism. You know, I didn't know how big was Boracay. I've been there several times. 4 square miles. Just a tiny island. 2 million tourists. And I've been there maybe 6 times, but every time I go back, my impression is worse. Because it's overdevelopment. It was not carefully planned out. But if you walk along the beach and go inside to the water, it's like powder. They really have something very special for them, but they did not know how to take advantage. And they just allow over tourism. How can 4 square miles have 2 million tourists? You know, right? And then if you see some pictures even in Bali and other places. So we don't want, and we don't have the resources, especially our labor. We don't have the labor to welcome 2 million tourists. Okay, we have to be realistic. And is that really good for the resident? See, those are all important questions that has to be raised, has to be answered, and lead to the final vision. And it will be sustainable. It has to be sustainable. Yeah. So this is, you know, Governor, this is the first attempt. This recommendation from Dalina is only a recommendation, you know, and Dalina, I know, will continue to adjust, you know, based on what she hear back from all the different stakeholders. And by the time she has the freedom to come back and spend, you know, time here, and then we'll sit down and revise and update the plan. But it has to be implementable. It has to be supported, you know, by the stakeholder. But I do feel that I feel good about, you know, putting this plan together. But air service is something that I feel we need to drill into it and see how we should approach it, because it's a chicken and egg. And I'm glad Brian, for example, our council member Brian is here. You know, in the last 10 years, Elan is probably the biggest investor, you know, in the Commonwealth. Yeah, so having Brian here to spend time and look at the opportunity, you know, we want to attract new investors. But guess what? We already have an existing investor. We have local investor, we have regional investor, we have existing investor who understand the Marianas. So, you know, we should all sit down together and believe into the vision, believe this is the right way to expand, and this is the right way to develop our tourism destination and really take advantage of the multi-island again. And really exciting that every island has something unique to offer. Every island has a different positioning. It's just a matter of coming together and agreeing to it. And somehow the pandemic actually kind of helped us. Because in the old days, if you want to tell people to come here for a week, they probably say, no, it's impossible. I'm taking so many other trips. Why would I spend a week here? But right now, people are taking longer trips and fewer trips. So multi-island become attractive. For example, are you going to spend 2 weeks in Guam? What are you going to do 2 weeks in Guam? As an example, right? But if you come here, you can spend 2 weeks just going through all the islands that Alina described. You see? And that's post-pandemic opportunity that actually is available to us. And do you really want to go to Hong Kong? Which beautiful city, but crowded. You know, some people say, no, I'm not going to go to Marianas because I want to go to Hong Kong. That's in the old days. But today, right? You know, people would say that, you know what, I can go to Hong Kong later. Okay, but right now, I would prefer to go to safe and island destination like the Marianas, for example. So it actually, the timing-wise, in planning post-pandemic, Dalina, I feel actually is our advantage as well, compared to even pre-pandemic. But during the downtime, we really have to do our part, you know, in terms of our destination, our hotel product, and everything. Planning, we really need to do all those things during the downtime. Because you don't want to wait until all the buses loaded of tourists coming back, and then we're going to go and fix them up. That's why when I bike past last command post, that's why I told our team, let's go. We need to clean up and paint last command post, because I know all those sites are heavily visited by the tourists. But when are you going to do it? You're going to do it now, right? Not wait until the tourists come back. So timing also is very important. So any other comments from our council member that joined us via Zoom in Saipan before we move on our agenda? Speaker?
Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker? Or any of the council member?
Good morning. Sorry about that. No comment on my end. I look forward to maybe the recommendations that Alex brought up earlier, based on the presentation, to maybe see how we can approach the ideas that were presented for our economic development and upgrading our tourist sites. Thank you.
I just wanted to also acknowledge those that are, Mr. Speaker, those that are on Zoom. Thank you for logging in this morning and joining the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for your presentation this morning. We appreciate your time, and good morning, early morning, Saturday morning in Hong Kong.
Thank you very much.
So with that, we do want to welcome and recognize the presence of Councilmember Marcy Tumakani. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mrs. Tumakani. And we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, Chairman. Updates from the Tourism and Infrastructure Committee on alternative energy, utility and fuel co-op, and solid waste management from from Alex.
Let me just introduce him. So, on the ongoing discussions, Governor, we are having presentations that are being provided for by now council members, but really the discussion about solid waste management is ongoing. We're hopeful that we can possibly put together that task force so we can move that effort forward. And then an ongoing, and I'm thankful to CUC for commissioning the update to the integrated resource plan. We're hopeful to get that very quickly. I think we need to update the technologies because we're going to have a multi-pronged approach towards energy in the Marianas. And I think we talked about it last night, and not to put this on Rota, but I mean the discussion that was had at the table, Mayor, Senator, about the possibility of Rota becoming 100% off the grid in renewable energy, as an example. And the discussion that could possibly be had for Tinian as well, for that size of populace. But really looking forward towards, the advent of what's happening regionally. We don't necessarily want to have to attach ourselves to Guam, but I think we do need to have the recognition that they are looking at alternative energies. The possibility of LNG way downline. Right now, it's cost prohibitive to store fuel, that type of fuel, LNG, but they are buying their units that are multifaceted, so they're going to be fossil fuel, LNG combined as a component of their energy streams. And the hope is that, we can take advantage, if that's the vision for the Commonwealth, take advantage of the economies of scale of moving this type of fuel between the islands or to the islands. And so what has come forward with this committee is Gary Sword presented along with Michael Hsu the idea behind storing a fuel and the advent of providing for a co-op that could incorporate CNMI investment into what I think is should be the future of savings in the overall fuel distribution component. And so with that, I want to ask Gary if he could make his presentation on the fuel co-op that we are talking about today at this committee level. Thank you.
Also members of the committee and those that are on Zoom. This presentation is about a fuel tank cooperative proposal for private and public partnership. This is based on a model that has been in effect in American Samoa for the last 30 years. It was signed by Governor Peter Coleman in 1992 as an executive order. Has now gone through 6 governors without anybody touching it, so it must be working and must be helping the people. It's the question that the thing that everybody complains about, but nothing has been done for a long time, and we take this opportunity to bring it forth. And that's the price of fuel. It affects our travel and the airlines, it affects our cars, it affects our government, it affects our schools, it affects our hospital. Everything is based on fuel. So we wanted to bring this up to the committee to establish a petroleum co-op that will build a 300,000 barrel petroleum bulk facility that will invite other fuel suppliers. Right now we are tied to 2 fuel suppliers, Shell and Mobil, who are the only ones who own tanks. And when you do a full fuel co-op, anybody, at one time we had 5 fuel companies supplying American Samoa because the fuel tanks were there. Petroleum companies don't necessarily want to run a tank farm, they just want to sell. So that is their main objective, is to sell fuel. And by doing a fuel farm, we're looking at something on the level of 25% savings in our fuel costs. The problem right now is that our fuel tank capacity is lacking. These tanks were built quite a time back when there was less vehicles, less travel, less power usage. We've grown since then, but the tanks farm hasn't. And they're owned by 2 monopolies. There's no incentive to expand or innovate to reduce fuel costs to our community. And this has transpired into higher electricity rates, which everybody knows your REACT charges. We hate those things. Well, it's simply because the expensive fuel. And don't get mad at Gary Camacho, it's not him, it's just it costs a lot. And this is because of the shipping costs and also our economic growth. And the creation of a public-private tank farm leads to a 25% reduction in fuel. I just talked to my brother this morning, and he runs the fuel farm in American Samoa. What is your price at the pump today, right now, as we're talking? It's $3.20. It's more than $1 less than what we pay, but yet they're so much further away in American Samoa. We use about 53 million gallons a year in fuel. That says jet fuel, gasoline, and also diesel fuel. And by the way, fuel, petroleum products is our largest, 21% of our imports is petroleum products. That's a lot for a small community. Potential benefits: it introduces competition because the fuel farm would be open to any company that wants to sell fuel in the Marianas. They only have to meet 3 criteria. 1, their fuel has to be API rated, which is Association of Petroleum Institute standards. Number 2, you agree to sell your fuel based on the average of Singapore spot price and Los Angeles spot price. Whatever the medium is, that's what you're going to sell your fuel for. You cannot go with it. It's called the maximum allowable price. So the prices the fuel companies will be selling their fuel is based on a worldwide price, not somebody waking up in the morning, oh, we need more money over here to pay this. No, it's based on something that. And the third thing is that you pay a throughput cost. For this project, we're looking at 10 cents per gallon to throughput. So you bring your fuel, park it there, we charge you 10 cents per gallon to pay for the bond or whatever we're going to float to run this community. It'll be lower costs at the fuel pump, lower utility rates, and lower operating costs for the government. Government pays a big chunk of its revenues to pay the fuel bill. The benefits to tourism is that there's more flights for hotels, reduced operating costs, especially those that run their own generators. And the lower fuel costs should help are ocean and marine based and airport concessions, and create more tourism because of the lower price of fuel. Potential benefits for our government can expand services due to the fuel savings, the savings on the fuel costs. We know that we have a lot of cars in the government that provide services, and 25% savings off of that fuel bill, I'm sure can go to other things. Lower fuel prices will create more demands, more flights will be coming in because of the lower price fuel. Right now, a lot of the flights bring in their own fuel to do the return flight because our fuel is too expensive. So these are some of the things that would be beneficial to us, tax revenues. And then with the lower price fuel and disposable income to businesses, businesses can hire people and expand. For the fishermen, fuel costs are 75% of their expenses. It is their biggest expense for fishermen is fuel. And lower fuel costs could open up fishing in the northern islands, around Rota, around our island group, and just more leisure activities, ocean activities. The benefits by the numbers. We used an average price of $4.05. We know it's $4.60 at the pump, but we're lumping all of the diesel fuel, the jet fuel, and also the gasoline in there. If we came up with an average price of $4.05 a gallon, if we can save 25% of this, we will be saving $1.01. You add into that the petroleum co-op fees, we're using 10 cents as a model for this one. So your total savings is 91 cents a gallon, based on 53 million gallons. The amount of money that we will be saving in the CNMI would be $48,212,850 per year, just by having a petroleum co-op. All right, it will create a few jobs at the co-op, but the most part is going to be out in the community where businesses can now expand, businesses have more disposable income. They have that $48 million in the pockets. It pays for a lot of things in our community. The cost for a 300,000 barrel fuel system, a fuel tank, is about $46 to $50 million. But what this does, right now our tankers come in every 28 days. It gives you enough fuel for 3 months. So that if something should happen, like we saw at the Suez Canal where the tanker was, the shipping was stuck, we have enough fuel to provide for our power, water, and our infrastructure. We won't shut down. We have enough backing. Right now we only have 28 days of storage. But if we increase that to 3 months, one, you'll get a lower price on fuel because you're buying more fuel. And number two, it's going to be lower price on shipping because the ship comes in, it costs $1 million, doesn't matter if you ship 1 gallon or you ship 10 million gallons, it's still, the shipping cost is still going to be the same. So you can spread the cost of that fuel over a larger amount of fuel. So this is one of the things that we think it's going to be a game changer for us. We're looking at quality over quantity. We're looking at a better CNMI, a stronger CNMI, and this is one of the things that will really make us strong is to have a solid petroleum co-op that will provide fuel at ideal price based on world markets, not on just here. This is based on the world market. But also it will allow for more competition, which will drive prices down and help our people and our business community. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Gary. Again, this is a real world example, and it's in American Samoa, which, as everyone knows, amongst our insular territories, is the most far removed from America, as well as many of all of us. And so the fact that they are able to take on Platts Singapore as their provider and distributor and get this type of savings, I think it's somewhat, I would say, no-brainer. Again, the concept behind this is we're not taking away Mobile and Shell's distribution. They can still garner that, they can still operate under that. What we're offering is fuel storage capacity that would get the quality of, the economies of scale down to be able to achieve this kind of savings. So they could draw from these tanks like any other operator could in the Marianas. And again, the cost savings, I think, are astronomical and would be beneficial to the end user and would solve a lot of the political questions that come in year out about we're going to take on a new power generation plant, but we're going to raise our costs. No, we don't need to if we could look at this idea. And then again, to end our kind of presentation on this committee, we're also talking about the advent of co-opting the utility corporation. Forgive me, Gov, I use this and I apologize to every administration that plays out this, but you're doing an excellent job within your administration to operate the utility company as best you can because of its conditions. But we want to be able to build sustainability and legacy beyond your administration into the next. We can't always, I guess, agree that the next administration is going to do a better job or maintain the job that this administration has done. And I think this historically, if we look at it, that's played out. Is that we got great engines, they weren't maintained in the past, and we don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on the future. And so the advent of providing for the opportunity for CNMI residents, CNMI investors to develop a co-op that becomes ours, that becomes CNMIs, that is within our scope and our ability to reinvest and keep it going. And I think if you have enough of us at the table concerned about this utility corporation, that we would not see what we've seen in the past go forward in the future. And so with the idea of the fuel co-op, we're also throwing the idea that once we settle on an integrated resource plan, that we also look at the idea of co-opting the utility, water, wastewater opportunity within the CNMI as well. And so those are going to be ongoing discussions within committee. We're hopeful to have a report to you and a recommendation from this council about how we move forward. So we will be enlisting other experts within the industry to provide us some counsel, and hopefully that we can get a good recommendation going forward. So thank you very much, Governor.
Are there any questions from council members on the call? Comments? Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add or present before we close out?
Yeah, hi everybody. Just on that last bit, Joe was just looking at some of the numbers that were presented. And it seems like a fuel farm does have a revenue generating potential, and so while the benefits expanded outwards to the public is pretty profound, that maybe it's worth considering using some of those benefits and capturing it in terms of bond repayments and financing options and repayment and debt service in order to afford the $46 million upfront capital expenditure. And so I think that's definitely something that if the numbers work out on a revenue basis would make a lot of sense. We've been looking at a lot of what are the revenue generating components of the CNMI government units and where can financing and privatization come in. And so that's creating a new one and possibly giving us a little bit more options. But on the diversification front, I've been working with Joe Grail, one of the members of the diversification committee, on a proposal that we're just about finishing, targeting commercial fishing and how exactly can the CNMI government help support commercial fishing enterprises. Currently at the present, there's only 18 vessels that are registered as commercial fishing vessels in the Commonwealth. The demand has historically been there, where there was a considerable amount of revenue being generated from the fishery stock in the CNMI during the 1997-1998 period, where there was a lot of sales into the hotels and the market. and the expansion of domestic production with existing resources. Since then, it's fallen dramatically. Even within the last 2 years, the number of commercial fishing vessels fell by 33%, and the overall vessels being registered fell considerably. And so there's a need there is a market for fish that are harvested and catched within the Commonwealth. And there is a potential to sell it into the market. But one of the main impediments and hurdles to encouraging the additional amounts of commercial fishing operations is the access to capital, access to financial capital. And under current banking practices here, there isn't very many options at all for traditional financing to purchase a boat. And so within the reformatting of CETA and the new focus on really encouraging economic development and linkages, we're trying to put together the case for a direct lending program to support not just the acquisition of commercial vessels, but an overall program to support the commercial fishing industry among residents, which would include contracting for commercial fishing training, which would include incentives to support a fishermen's co-op that provide actual tangible benefits for fishermen participating in the co-op and actively being involved in the sale of fish to the market. And so that's a coming soon element, and that I would love to work it through and present it to the group. Thank you.
If there's nothing further, Chairman, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, open discussion with council members. Brad, would you like to say anything? Just checking. Alrighty, so if nothing further.
I just also wanted to make another plug for the diversification committee. Sorry, I forgot about this one. We're working through the language and some of the details on the second step of the CETA framework. We originally envisioned creating CETA as the organization in charge, and really giving them the ability and the strength to support economic development at the forefront. The other element is really looking at the tool that is the primary tool for incentivizing foreign financing and U.S. financing in Paloa, which is the qualifying certificate program. And so we're going through the language. I believe it's ran through the House Legal Counsel for request, and we're just fixing it up and getting it ready, and asking for council support and honorable members of the legislature that are present for consideration of that. It's a number of different things. It provides for a little bit more flexibility for the board of CETA to utilize the very powerful program and the opportunity that's available in tax incentives. It allows it to be a little bit more competitive and in line with the national methods used by other economic development organizations and communities around the United States in competing for U.S. investment. And it throws out the new program of the Strategic Investment Initiative program, which would put CETA and the CNMI government at the forefront of deciding what development projects they would like to have in the CNMI, whether it's tourism related or otherwise, going through the steps, acquiring the permits, the pre-approvals, and then packaging a product that they would be able to market and sell as a shovel-ready investment project that eliminates a lot of the hurdles that we talked about earlier when it comes to permitting and the difficulties in going over the bureaucracy component of investing in the CNMI, especially if you're a U.S. business. And so ideally, with these two things together, CETA will be adequately empowered to be able to really market and entice U.S. investment primarily into the CNMI. So thank you.
Yep. Go ahead. No. First of all, thanks for having me here. In general, I wasn't planning to be here actually because I had another arrangement, but it forced myself to be here out here and experience the Rota, and then it's a big eye opener for me personally, and then there's absolutely nothing negative about this place. I mean, I'm gonna preserve my comments about Rota yet because I haven't had experience any of the other components. But I think there's a lot of things that we can do as multi-island destinations. We had an agenda that we talked about today. Also the energy savings, I mean, those are things that it directly impacts, at least my business and my company. So there's a lot of great things that are happening here, and I appreciate being part of it.
No reference to Matt's recommendation about giving more teeth to the CEDA legislation. I understand that the Senate have concurred the House version without any amendment, and because if there is amendment from the Senate, maybe you can ask the House to do the necessary rejection to ensure that we expedite what that amendment needs to be incorporated in that present form of the bill. But since the Senate passed the House version without any amendment, so I think the bill is heading to the governor now. And what can be done is to make another proposal to amend the CEDA bill very soon to ensure that the concern is being incorporated in that law. So that's for the information, very much.
And thank you for that. Just the way that we were proposed it originally within the last year was because the CEA governing statute is a separate section of the law versus the Investment Incentive Act of 2000, which was a different law entirely. But the framework was creating CEDA and then supplementing that with an additional legislation that would be larger and a little bit more directed towards the Investment Incentive Act, which, it's in the separate section.
So I think Matt, the speaker, is with us through this virtual meeting, so maybe you can share with him what the necessary amendment that is needed to be incorporated in this bill, or when the bill is already at the governor's office awaiting for signature, when we can perhaps expedite the amendment to whatever public law that will be next week. Thank you.
The last item on the agenda, adjournment and scheduling our next meeting, which, as we understand, will be held in Tinian towards the end of June. Tentatively looking at June 25, 26, 27.
Yeah, so the intent behind Tinian's visit will be another BPP that will be supported by the minority bloc and any other members that would like to join in. The invitation for this meeting was presented to all members of the legislature, and I think we also should incorporate the municipal councils of the island as well. But that we do this towards a weekend type approach, and so we will be there for the possibly Friday or Saturday meeting, and then meeting on a Sunday again. That's the intent.
So I recommend that, Mr. Chairman, maybe if the June schedule is anticipated for the 26th, or I think that's a better schedule, or 27. 27, the Senate will be there for the committee meeting, so I'd like also the members to participate during this poll. So between 27 and 28, probably the meeting for the Economic Council. This will be on Saturday.
Thank you. So last words.
I'll go first, and then Jared can close it. Mayor, I want to thank you again.
Yes, thank you.
And all your staff, and just as proud of you. I know the other senators have left, but thank you, all of you. We do have a lot of work ahead of us, but we are definitely moving forward. We started the separation of CDA and NMHC through the executive order. knowing that we didn't have to do law, we created the Infrastructure and Recovery Program, of course, through the recommendation of the GCEA. CEDA just passed the Senate. That again is a recommendation from the organization. We're working on the universal garbage collection and of course the integrated resource plan for CUC. And then the petroleum is what we're going to be focusing a lot on. I too want to be very intimate into that discussion. So we have a lot of work ahead, but definitely a lot of work has been done. And Darlene, thank you again for the work that you've put into, and I look forward to working with you, not just for MBA, but other issues that we have for the CNMI. So again, thank you, and have a good morning.
Yeah, I want to echo Governor also that not just this week, but every time when we come over to Rota, our mayor here is just a great host, including last night. So Mayor, really appreciate your hospitality, your warm welcome, and hope you enjoy this morning's presentation. As I mentioned many times that the council is really looking at the entire Marianas, recognizing Rota, Tinian, Northern Island is a very important component. And I look at Talina's presentation, if people decide to spend time in Northern Island or Rota or Tinian, Saipan also benefit. Because every package, somehow Saipan has 1 night, 5 nights, 3 nights under each package. So it's really mutual beneficial to all islands. And so this is really an important step that we're taking as a long-term impact to the entire Marianas economy. But this would only happen if we have the support of everyone. So making recommendation is one thing, but having the buy-in is a totally different thing, that we have to go work 10 times harder. I think this is the easy part, right, Alina? Okay. Alina put in a lot of work, but at the end of the day, we want the recommendation to happen, just like CEDA, the recommendation to need to a real, concrete result. But of course, this is so much more challenging when you're talking about the entire Marianas tourism, and we want to towards world-class destination, quality of life for the resident. It's no easy task, but with the support and participation of all the council members who take their time out to, again, I always emphasize, it's not just a once-a-month meeting for the whole morning, but every week, the committee meetings, the work that they put in. We have a very great council working together, so congratulations to the first anniversary of our GCEA, and just really enjoy our time so far in Rota, Mayor. So looking forward to coming back again. Always enjoyed spending time here, and we look forward to going to Tinian next month as well. So have a great weekend, everybody. Safe flight, travel back to Saipan for some of us. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, I just wanted to thank you again, and you are all welcome to Rota. They say, what are we doing when there is no tourism? That's outside tourism. But you folks here are the local tourists. Yeah, so, on behalf of the people of Rota, the leadership, thank you for having this meeting, Governor and Chairman. Thank you for having this meeting here in Rota. And like I said, you're all welcome. And thank you very much. Thank you.
There is a lunch at 12 p.m. at the Sinapalo basketball court, followed by more PPP work with our partners, with the minority up there in Sinapalo. So the Meeting is adjourned. We'll see everybody at 12 at the Sinapolo Basketball Court for lunch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.